Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Captain's Table. I'm your host, Captain B-Nard, and topic of discussion today is going to be a review of Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. That's right, folks, just when you thought we were done bitching about Star Wars, we are now going to bitch about Star Wars some more. So, here to discuss that with me, returning to the Captain's Table, we have the not-so-expert panel of movie critics. So for the eighth time, we have Jonny Reps.
Am I supposed to introduce myself?
Yeah,
Hello.
that's your cue, Johnny.
Hello there.
Hello there. Yes, and returning for the ninth time, Mitchelonius.
Hello, everybody.
Coming to us live from inside of a refrigerator.
Sure. All right. So, basically, what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be going over uh, the Rise of Skywalker, which is about a month old at this point. So, take a little bit of time to digest the movie and kind of think about it. So we're going to be talking about everything we liked about it, everything we didn't like about it. Spoiler alert, the list of things we didn't like about it is probably going to be a lot longer than the list of things we did like about it, but, that's
Now,
just
do you want to do a spoiler-free review first, and then like a
absolutely
spoiler
not.
review, or
No, there's all
just to
it's
make the
chock
whole
full of
thing?
spoilers.
Okay.
So, well, what I was gonna do was we're gonna kind of go over like our general thoughts about the movie, and kind of like big takeaways from it, and then we're gonna get into talking about specifics about the movie. Anything that kind of stood out to us as a whole with the movie, and then we're also going to kind of reflect upon the sequel trilogy as a whole now that that is in the books and all finished. So. Anybody else have anything they want to add to that? Guess not. All right, so we're just going to go ahead and get started then. So I'll start things off here. I want to start off by saying that, unlike The Last Jedi, which we've bitched about at length here before, I will say that I didn't hate this movie, The Rise of Skywalker. I didn't particularly like it either, but I didn't hate it either. So, um, I thought that there were good parts to it. There was a lot of good action in the movie, good fight sequences. There was a lot of fan service, although it was kind of hit or miss. Some of it landed pretty well, some of it didn't. There
Would
was
you
a nice.
say some of it landoed?
Yeah, I was gonna make a Lando pun there, but I didn't, and then you got there. So yeah, nice job. Yeah, some of it Lando. Ironically, though, I think a lot of the Lando fan service didn't really hit, but we'll talk about that in a second. Um, there was also a nice tribute to the late Carrie Fisher, which was nice, and
What's
the mo-
what's she, what's she late for?
Oh God. I get yeah. Well, there you have it. Status quo here on the captain's table has been returned, uh, and yeah. So and then also there was it was just kind of like a fun ride. I think all overall the movie was kind of a fun ride to me. Although there were, as we're going to talk about at length here, a lot of issues with this movie, and first and foremost, the biggest one, which was kind of the same as it was in The Last Jedi, and that's just the massive, glaring plot holes in the story and the characters and just
Well, why don't we
everywhere.
just kind of give? Do you want me to give like a brief synopsis of the
Yeah,
movie first?
I was just
Just to
gonna
kind of
actually
like
turn it over to
go.
you, Johnny, to go ahead and go ahead and give your general thoughts here on the movie as well, because those are kind of my general thoughts.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to just refresh everybody's memory because I'm assuming if you watch this, you've probably seen the movie and you just want to hear a bunch of assholes bitch about it. Uh, so that's what we're gonna do. Uh, so basically, the movie starts out. Kylo Ren, uh, Ray is finally training. That's a good thing. That's like the first good thing about this movie. But before
Yes.
that even happens, we get like an intro scrawl that there's just a lot that happens in this movie. That's actually one of the problems. So there's an intro scroll where they basically say Palpatine is back apparently, no reason given, and
Yep.
he broadcasts some message to the galaxy through Fortnite. Um, that's actually
No, it
what
was J.J.
happened.
Abrams, but go ahead.
That no, he actually broadcasted through Fortnite. That's what happened.
Oh
And
God.
yeah, and
JJ,
Kylo
did
Ren,
you?
I
I
guess,
don't know
was
if you know this, but JJ Abrams actually did broadcast over Fortnite like a week before the movie came out.
Yeah, and they broadcast Palpatine's message that they talk about. They actually broadcasted it through Fortnite.
Really? I'd missed that. I
I missed it too, but I found it on YouTube.
Oh, all right then.
Yeah, and
Go on.
yeah, so yeah, if you want to watch that, just look it up, and it's only about 60 seconds long, and it really doesn't make any more sense of this mess of a movie, but uh, it does. It's there. So yeah, after that, as I said, Rey is training finally uh, on some planet with the Rebel Resistance or whatever the hell they're called now. I guess
Yeah.
they're back to being the Resistance, even though they were rebels at the end of the last movie.
Yep.
Then Palpatine is being searched. Kylo Ren finds some item that he uses to find Palpatine in some
It's
weird
the
upside down
Sith
temple.
Wayfinder is what it is.
Yeah, they don't say that at this point, but
Yeah.
yeah, he finds Palpatine at some upside down temple.
Yep.
Palpatine then quotes Revenge of the Sith and tells Kylo Ren to well, I don't know. It's his motivations and his plan in this movie is kind of keeps changing and or it's not very clear. But I
Hmm.
think he wants him to kill Rey or bring him Rey so he can corrupt her or drain both of their life energy. It's really not 100% clear on exactly what his plan was, to be honest. Uh,
Yeah, that's a problem as well.
so then, what happens next? Palpatine. I'm sorry. Everybody's trying to find Palpatine,
Yep.
so they go and do a bunch of shit. I guess I'm
Yeah,
just
the
gonna
good guys
fast
are
forward
looking
through
for
a
the
lot of
other
stuff.
Sith
Yeah,
Wayfinder
the
because
good
I
guys.
guess there's two.
Yeah, the good guys are actually no, they're actually looking for a thing that will show them the spot in the specific Death Star wreckage, the specific spot in the wreckage to look for to find another thing, and then they have to use that other thing to find Palpatine. But in order to find the first thing, they first have to go to Burning Man and visit Lando or some shit like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know how it sounds confusing, but this is probably a better explanation than the movie puts forth, to be honest.
That's why
Uh,
I'm laughing is because it kind of like the way that you're describing everything is about the level of explanation that was given in the movie itself. So
yeah, I
that's
think I'm doing a better job. I
yeah,
think I'm
you
doing a better
might be.
job. So yeah, and then they go through a bunch of fetch quests. Han Solo appears for some reason.
Yeah.
They end up at Carrie Fisher. I guess Leia dies.
Yep.
I mean, she does die, but it's kind of weird the way they do it. And then
We find
they
out
go
that
to
Rey is
the
Jesus apparently, which is another big
yeah.
problem with this movie.
Ray can all of a sudden heal people with the Force. She thinks she kills Chewie, but she didn't. Poe has some random girlfriend who doesn't matter. They introduce a bunch of merchandising opportunities. I mean, new characters, and then they go to the Ultra Death Star planet, where every ship on this planet has Death Star technology that can blow up planets, and it's an entire fleet of Star Destroyers that Palpatine somehow has. I guess that he built on his own, or he conjured them with the Force, or something. They don't really say.
Yep.
Then yeah, then Lando flies around the galaxy, and he's supposed to broadcast a beacon, right, to bring in because at the end of the Last Jedi, actually, this is one of the only things the movie did right. They actually referenced the end of Last Jedi where the Resistance put out a beacon and nobody shows up, so they're like, well, if Lando goes around in the Falcon and picks people up,
Yes,
uh,
old man Billy D flies around on the Falcon going like,
yeah,
then the people will come.
they rightly predicted that everyone likes Lando. So
Yes.
I mean, but then they kind of ruined him in this movie by having him basically be geriatric. Uh,
Well, and also showing up for no reason, but we'll get back to that
yeah,
later.
And
yeah,
didn't he
it's
even
just
say he didn't he even say that he couldn't pilot as well as he used to be able to?
He did say that, and
probably.
then he ended up piloting anyway. So,
Yeah, that's weird, but
He was
that's what
like,
he
"Yeah, I can't fly that thing anymore," and then all of a
he
sudden,
does.
yeah, and then all of a sudden he does. So there you go. That is
Great,
true.
and
That did happen
yeah,
en route to Kylo Ren's
oh
redemption for no apparent reason. Despite that his
yeah, that's
character
right.
hasn't changed at all in the course of the past three movies, he somehow decided that it's time to repent. So
Yeah, and he gets to kiss Ray for some reason, even though he tried to kill her multiple times. Uh,
well, that was
so
just
that's just
building the
crazy.
sexual tension between the two of them that all
But
led up to the
they
point in
never,
time where they'd finally join forces, and then they finally vanquish mechanized zombie Palpatine from his cave that he's apparently been living in for the past 30 years.
Although they don't really even say if he's mechanized or zombie, they just kind of make him look like he's kind of decaying. I
Yeah.
guess did he survive the Death Star? He said he died multiple times. Is that the real Palpatine? Is it a clone? Like they don't really explain any of this. And then Finn also makes a new friend that is in the movie for like 5 minutes, and then they charge on top of a Star Destroyer with like water buffalo or something.
Yes.
Yeah,
All the
that
while that
actually
this is
happened.
all the while that
Yeah,
this is
so
going
it's
on.
it's kind of hopeless at the end of the movie. The Rebel fleet's fighting the Imperial fleet, and they're all getting shot down. And Finn is like, Poe's like, oh my god, everybody's dying. It's a terrible idea, but of course he doesn't get shot down. And then on the
No,
last minute,
main character
no,
powers,
no,
man.
hold up. On the last minute, Falcon shows up and goes on your left. I mean, no, at the last minute, Lando shows up and goes on your left. And
Yeah.
everybody
Well,
comes in.
technically, he was the Falcon. I see what you did there. I don't know
Yeah.
if you did that on purpose or not, but that was pretty funny.
Hold on. So then Palpatine starts shooting lightning at the sky, and for some reason he can blow up every starship in the sky with force lightning, which was never really a thing, but I guess it is now.
Yep.
After he drains Rey and Kylo Ren's life energy, I guess you can assume because they don't really, explain that how he does that or that was a thing until now.
Yeah.
And then
Among other
so
things
and
that were not a thing until right now for some reason.
exactly. So then Kylo Ren, or like Rey gets up, and like she gets apparently all the power of the Jedi's. Like you hear Mace Windu and all the Jedi's talk to her.
And Hayden
She gets all the
Christensen
power,
too.
right?
Let's
Even
not
Hayden
forget that.
Christensen. And then she comes up and she blocks Palpatine's lightning with her lightsaber. And then Palpatine says, "I am the Sith." And then Tony says, "I am Iron Man." I mean, no, I'm sorry. Rey says, "I am the Jedi." And then she uses the gauntlet and snaps the fingers, and Palpatine explodes.
And then no, and I know you're gonna appreciate this, Mitch. She also apparently, because I know, calling back to the original trilogy, apparently Rey deflecting Palpatine's Force lightning with her sabers apparently inflicts enough damage to kill Palpatine, whereas him getting thrown into the Death Star reactor did not inflict enough damage
No,
to
no,
kill
she
him.
didn't. She didn't kill him. He literally exploded. No, he
Yeah,
kind of like disintegrated actually.
yeah, but he's been disintegrated before.
So he's okay.
Yeah, he's fine. But yeah.
It was just, yeah, it was his spirit. His spirit lived on.
I guess. So yeah, and then
Again, it's not really explained, just like everything else in the movie.
yeah.
So now that we have the bare bones of the plot out of the way, what
Yes,
to?
well thank you for that. That was
I think we're gonna say that about pretty much a lot of what our complaints are. Is the reason why they're complaints is because there's a lack of explanation, so there's no understanding as to why it was there or necessary.
yes, 100%, absolutely.
I'm not gonna say that it's not really, to me. It's not really a lack of explanation. It's more the fact that like they make these obscene. It's because like movies that are kind of like they're up for interpretation, stuff like that. Like that's all cool. But in this movie, it's just like they make all these like wild jumps and like crazy force powers that never existed before, and then give you no explanation for how or why any of these things are happening. And it's just like, oh, I guess that's a thing now.
Yeah, and that pretty well sums up the movie. As at the end, for some reason, Rey dies, but then somehow, because now everybody can like throw their life energy around like it's nothing,
This
Kylo
is
can
like Dragon Ball Z now.
yeah, yeah, Kylo can somehow throw his life energy into Rey and sacrifice himself to save her with that one kiss. And there you have it. And then
And with that, I need another beer.
yeah, yeah. So that's pretty much. And then at the end, Rey buries Luke and Leia's lightsabers as some kind of symbolic burying the past type of horse crap, and reveals that she in fact has a new yellow lightsaber, which I will say is kind of neat to see that thing, even though we didn't see it in
She
action.
does one final insult to Anakin Skywalker / Darth Vader by burying his lightsaber in sand, which we all know he hates.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that too. Um, So yeah, that's the synopsis that kind of covers the movie in a very crude and humorous way, which is I wouldn't have it any other way. So nice work there, Johnny. Um, there's a lot of problems with all this stuff, or most of this stuff, and
I wish it had like George Costanza's father's quote to play from Festivus, where he's like, "I got a lot of problems with you people."
or
I
the
got a
old
lot of problems with
or what
the
about the
Rise
old
of Skywalker.
the old Johnny Rants quote is what was it? I don't remember what it was. Johnny's got a lot of problems, and you're gonna hear about it, or something like that.
Probably,
Anyway,
I don't remember.
I don't remember either. But anyway, so I think we have to address the elephant in the room first and
What,
foremost.
Mitch?
And yeah, no, no. Hey, Mitch, how's it going? You still alive over there, buddy? Over there, buddy.
Feeling good. Feeling good.
Okay. So we have to address the elephant in the room here, first and foremost, when talking about the massive plot holes in this movie, and that, for me, is simply this: how the fuck is Palpatine still alive after Return of the Jedi? And there's a lot of different theories and explanations as to possibilities of how this could have happened, both canon and not canon. However, we are never given a concrete explanation in the movie as to how this has happened. The only explanation we get in the movie is Palpatine regurgitating the quote that he gave to Anakin in Revenge of the Sith of the Force, or the dark side of the Force, is a pathway to abilities many
I think
consider unnatural.
we should have had Mitch say that. He can do a better Palpatine.
Yeah, we should have, but I guess it's too late. But you
Turn over to the dark side of the Force, Luke.
It's like you mixed Vader and Palpatine. You're getting a little tired.
sure, there you go. So
I got it. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready for the perfect Palpatine?
go for it.
Yeah.
Look out the window, Luke. Look at your friends as they die. Because I'm afraid the shield generators will be quite active.
It was operational, damn it.
You tried.
Okay.
And that was the entertainment value of the show. I'll be here all for the next 45 minutes.
I give that 4 stars, which is also my review for the Rise of Skywalker out of 10.
There you go. All right.
I will turn you to the dark side of the Force.
Hold on. Are you guys ready for my Palpatine impression?
Sure.
We all got to do one now. Are you ready?
I already did mine, and it was horrible. So go ahead.
Billy.
All right. So okay. So back to
No,
topic.
he does it like this. He goes, do it. Do it. That's how he says it. He says, do it.
I think he's talking about from Revenge of the Sith when he kills Dooku.
Do it.
I don't think
All right.
you've ever seen Revenge of the Sith.
No. All right. So listen here. So to try and bring things back to topic, which is always going to be a problem. So
Yeah.
there's in non-canon Star Wars, there's a comic or a book or whatever where apparently Palpatine made a bunch of clones of himself, and his spirit could hop from clone to clone essentially, so when one of them died his spirit could move to another one, therefore he essentially could never die. So that was a thing in a non-canon Star Wars story. However, people were kind of under the assumption that that was going to be the way that Palpatine was still alive in a physical form in this movie. However, feeding back to my point, that was never adequately explained or explored. It was kind of just left up to your own imagination of like, oh, how is Palpatine alive? When there was no concrete explanation given, and the only explanation at all we were given was that quote, or that, from Revenge of the Sith that was regurgitated at us. So this is, like I said, this is the elephant in the room for me. This is like the biggest of all the big plot holes that we have to contend with here.
Well, I heard there were rumors about a lot of different cuts of this movie, that like this movie was just a mess, and that the final cut of the movie was like there's like 10 different ones or something. Well, there's a bunch. I don't know if there's 10, but I heard in one of them that they showed to test audiences actually that they actually explained the clone thing that you said, and the audience apparently thought it was stupid, so they just cut it out of the movie and just gave no alternative.
Well, okay, but the problem is some explanation is better than no explanation. You know, like even if you're going to give me some horseshit explanation, which actually, by the way, I don't even personally, I don't think the clone explanation is even bad. Like that actually makes sense to me in the sense of like,
Not
okay,
really, but okay.
what's that?
Why didn't Jango Fett do it? He had millions of clones.
Well, because he wasn't a Sith, but you know, that's a
He
different
could have been.
story. But my thing is that would have been, although that's not that good of an explanation, that's way better than just not giving an explanation at all. Like what the fuck, you know what I mean? Like you have to, like if you're going to make some type of incredible leap in logic like that, you have to have some justification for it, even if it's not good justification. You know what I mean? Like there has to be some sort of explanation, you know.
I agree. I agree.
So it's like the fact that something so ridiculous like this, as the fact that, hey, here's this evil guy who was vaporized 30 years ago, but here he is alive again. Because, okay, let me say this: when I saw the trailer for the Rise of Skywalker, and it was you heard like the Palpatine laugh, and then the other one you could hear him talking in the background, and blah blah blah. I was thinking, okay, surely Palpatine is not going to be alive in some sort of physical form, because that would make no sense, right? He's got to be alive as some sort of like Force ghost, or whatever the Sith version of a Force ghost is, or whatever. But no, lo and behold,
Force,
he's a
Force
zombie hooked up to a
duel.
life support machine in a fucking cave somewhere. So,
Mm.
how did
It's
he
like
get
it's not a cave. It's like an upside down castle or something.
whatever? You know what I'm talking about. So it blows my mind to think that like anybody thought that this was a good idea. To not only do this was a good idea, but also to give no concrete explanation for how it happened. Like,
Can, can we also talk about the fact that like, I mean, this is not even. I'm not even sure. You said this is the elephant in the room, but
mhm.
I didn't want to believe that Palpatine was back either. Just like you, actually, I purposely avoided trailers and stuff. And I was like, he's not back. He can't be. And then I was like, oh, when I saw the beginning of the movie, I was just like, well, let's see where they're going with this. And the answer is nowhere. So yeah.
Yeah.
But I just think there's even besides that, like there's just so many problems with this movie. Like I would say the next biggest problem is probably the fact that like they have so much stuff to kind of clean up with the ending of because Last Jedi really kind of like just put Star Wars at a dead end. So they had to kind of like retcon and or ignore and or like kind of in kind of like a sideways manner address stuff that happened in Last Jedi, but not really directly because of the fact that it just kind of fucked up the entire universe.
Yep. Yep. It
Yeah.
did, and that was undoubtedly one of the biggest reasons for the all the problems with this movie. And that's why actually in my initial analysis of the movie, the last thing I was going to say, which I didn't get to, was that I do cut this movie a certain degree of slack, because of all the movies in the Star Wars universe, I think this movie was probably placed in the shittiest situation of any movie, because you have even shittier than Revenge of the Sith, actually, which I thought was not possible. Like back when Revenge of the Sith came out, I was thinking, okay, this movie is boxed in between two shitty prequels and a great original trilogy. How the fuck are they going to make any sense of this? And they actually did. Versus this movie was like you said, The Last Jedi just basically fucked the entire Star Wars universe, and now it's like left everything at a dead end, and then now it's like, where do you go from here? So that's why I cut this movie, The Rise of Skywalker, some slack, in the sense of it still managed to be an enjoyable ride as far as I'm concerned, even if there's so much about it that didn't make sense and so many issues with it. The fact that I still gained some sort of enjoyment out of watching this movie was still, a positive for me. Um, but obviously we have to address the fact that like this movie was just put in such a bad spot by all those reasons, and it just
Could you imagine that like if the equivalent of Last Jedi would be like if Phantom Menace, you know, it didn't really do a lot, but it kind of set some stuff up, right? Kind of similar how Force Awakens set up a bunch of stuff, right? But then instead of
right.
Attack of the Clones, Attack of the Clones was basically like a pointless movie. You know what I mean? Like
Oh,
not
I
much.
do.
I mean,
Yes.
yeah, it was kind of like by the end of Attack of the Clones, it was like the Clone Wars started, and then it's like that I thought that was what the movie was going to be about, was the Clone Wars, but
Yeah, which
and
would have
then
been way better, but go on.
yeah, so instead of like the movie kind of being, it was basically like the beginning of a story, right? Like the Attack of the Clones was like kind of the beginning of a story,
Right.
but and not terribly well executed. Versus like if they took the Last Jedi route, what they would have done instead would have been like, you know, kill off random characters
Hmm.
and basically set themselves up to like not where you'd say how they're gonna have to retcon shit for episode 4 to make any sense,
Yep.
right? That's
Yeah.
basically the position that episode 9 was put in.
Yeah.
If
Exactly.
like Attack of the Clones would have been like basically a total mess that broke the Star Wars universe, and then they would have had to retcon half the movie in episode 3 for episode 4 to make sense.
Yeah. Yep. I definitely see your point there, and that's the unfortunate reality of where this movie was put. So realistically, to me, there was no way that this movie was going to be like good. There was no way. There was no possible way, and there was just no way that it was going to clean up everything and make sense of everything. And that was actually the only hook that there was for me going into watching this movie. And I actually have to I'll take the opportunity now to say this. I boycotted this movie on opening weekend because I know it doesn't matter and I know George Lucas isn't going to notice my $10 and his billions missing, but I don't give a fuck. I did not see
George
this.
Lucas does not have anything to do with Star Wars
Well,
anymore. You know
whatever,
that,
Disney,
right?
you know what I
He
mean.
sold he sold Star Wars to Disney with fucking
He's still
whatever
involved
the
in
first and fourth.
production, isn't
He's
he?
not involved. He
Oh,
sold it for like several $billions. He's like like a third party consultant that they talk to sometimes. He's not
okay.
involved in like anything. It's all like
Regardless,
what's his name? It's all like Kathleen Kennedy and what's the other guy's name? Chris something. I
I
don't
don't
know.
fucking know. But anyway, my point is this. I did not see this movie opening weekend because I was still mad about The Last Jedi and still am. So I did not see this movie opening weekend. But the only real hook of going into watching this movie for me was how are they going to fix everything The Last Jedi fucked up? And to my surprise, actually, our answer was they're just going to ignore most of everything that happened in The Last Jedi and just not acknowledge his existence, like you were talking about earlier. And it astounded me, like, as I was going through watching this movie, and I was kind of looking for things to happen in this movie that would make sense of things that happened in The Last Jedi that would try to make it better or make it okay. And we just didn't get that. We didn't get it. It was like they just turned a
There
blind
was
eye to it.
like there was like one or two things.
Mostly, yeah. There was one or two maybe, but for the most part, they just turned a blind eye to just about everything that the Last Jedi screwed up, or at least they tried to. Um, Speaking along that kind of brings me to the next, huge plot hole that I want to talk about, or thing that didn't make sense in this movie, and that is the entire story that carried for not one, not two, but all three movies of Rey's parentage and Rey's lineage. Okay? So, let's think about this for a second here. In The Force Awakens, Rey, with no training whatsoever, mind you, clearly has power, clearly has skill with the Force, clearly has, you know, all this stuff going for her. And the hook is how? How is this possible? How is this happening? So, in The Last Jedi, one of the many, 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 many problems with that movie is we go on
Doesn't
to
matter.
find out that Rey's parents are apparently quote unquote nobodies, that they were nothing, that they were just peasants that sold her for drug money or whatever. So, you know, there was that. And then in this movie, we find out apparently that in order to draw this ridiculous parallel that should never have been drawn in the first place, in my opinion, we find out that Rey is Palpatine's granddaughter. Awesome, right? Just awesome. Which means that her parents, and this is a big sticking point for me, one of her parents were the direct descendant of Palpatine. And if I remember correctly, that was not even specified in this movie whether her mother or her father was the child of Palpatine. So that just goes to show you how little thought and effort into writing this storyline arc after 3 movies of this hook of, what's Rey's lineage, what's her parentage, like all this shit. Like after 3 movies of this, that's the best they could do is, oh, she's Palpatine's granddaughter. Her parents, one of them, we're not even going to say which one of them, but one of them was Palpatine's direct descendant.
Thoughts, Mitch?
What? What the fuck? Yeah, what do you think about that, Mitch?
Well, I mean, my biggest issue with this is, first of all, where did they ever indicate that Palpatine, in any way, shape, or form, had like a spouse or a significant other or
Nowhere.
whatever? Yeah, exactly. But with the age and everything, I mean, I don't know. My biggest gripe with it, I guess, is that like at the point where, I don't know, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but at the point where like Luke and like Leia were all like, "Oh, we knew who you were the whole time," but then like Luke refused to train her because she was strong in the Force. Like, if you knew that's Palpatine's fucking granddaughter, obviously she's not gonna like, not have any, like your Darth Vader's kid. That's the only reason you're relevant. You know what I mean? It's I don't know. And then
Do you think when
the
Palpatine
whole
got it on, he was like, "Do it"?
Okay. So another problem that with this is the fact that, okay, obviously, like bloodline passing the Force down and all that stuff is obviously a thing in the Star Wars universe.
But
Yet,
that was like completely contradictory to like the entire theme of The Last Jedi.
right?
Like the entire theme of The Last Jedi was like, it doesn't matter who you are, anybody can like be great or whatever. That I guess, I mean, it was a pretty much a mess the way they did it, but like that was kind of what they tried to do, right? Was make it like, oh, it doesn't matter who Rey is because she's just strong.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. Even though that doesn't make any sense, because that's one of the many sins against the Star Wars universe that we saw. But in traditional Star Wars, your lineage and the Force being passed down and all that stuff, like that's why Luke was so strong, because his father was Anakin slash Darth Vader, and that's why Kylo Ren is so strong, is because his grandfather was Darth Vader, his mother was Princess Leia. So that's a thing in the Star Wars universe. Yet in this movie, in the flashback, it's like, okay, they depict Rey's parents as just these like random nobodies that just get cut down like field mice in this flashback by by these faceless minions, essentially. And
Why
it's like,
weren't they like super powerful in the Force?
that's what I'm trying to say. You took the words right out of my mouth. And again, they didn't even specify which one either.
Yeah, but maybe they wouldn't have known that they were, if they didn't. Maybe they didn't know they had a relation to Palpatine. And I mean, because when we first met Rey, she was just a scavenger. She wasn't anyone who was like using Force powers or anything. So I mean, that's always possible too.
I mean,
But again, none
it's
of this
possible,
is ever,
but
like,
yeah, it's
hinted
not.
at
No,
or
they didn't say
explained.
that. None of this is explained or explored in any capacity. So you would think like,
Which brings me back to my main point: is that everything that we have to seem to have an issue with this is because of the lack of explanation.
yes, you're 100% right, 100%,
But
because
again, the movie had so much shit to clean up after Last Jedi that it's like they couldn't have possibly explained everything adequately.
exactly,
The
and
movie would have been like 2 days long.
yeah, exactly, and but that
Yeah, but they could have picked a storyline that they could have explained a little quicker, as opposed to
Yeah,
Palpatine, who should, you know.
yeah, they could have.
Just
They,
made it
they
even
definitely
more
could have done
confusing.
better. That's why my chief gripe is they definitely could have done, in my opinion, a better job of trying to explain some of the horse shit than they did. And this whole
They should have had Mace Windu come back all fucked up.
oh my god.
With his arm missing.
Yeah, because everybody's always alive. That's the moral of Star Wars, is everyone's always alive. No one's ever really gone, just like the trailer said, just like Luke said.
Join the dark side, motherfucker.
Yeah, Samuel will join the dark side, but yeah, it's like it's like, I don't know. it's just so like, oh, and by the way, another pet peeve of this movie, of the fact of like, Luke has all of like 3 minutes in this movie. Granted, he's now a Force ghost, although somehow Force ghosts can pick things up and influence the natural world, because when Rey goes to throw her lightsaber into the flaming wreckage of the ship, apparently Luke's Force ghost caught it, because
Mm,
that's a thing
Yeah, I
now.
could. Yeah, at least they were consistent with that. Like Yoda did that in Last Jedi.
I mean, but is The Last Jedi really the Star Wars movie you want to maintain consistency with? Like, really?
Well, I mean, it was the most recent one in canon.
Well, that is true. But oh, and speaking of things that don't make sense of along that line, one
Oh,
other
we
thing
got a
that
lot
happened in
more.
this movie quite a bit that I didn't grasp is how the hell is now apparently Rey and Kylo Ren can like transport matter in between each other, like with they like fought each other in like their minds, but apparently it happened physically, where Darth Vader's mask apparently transported from Rey to Kylo, and then at the end of the movie, Rey was able to hand off the lightsaber to Kylo to save him, and like, what the fuck? Like, the only explanation I have for this, folks, is apparently Rey and Kylo Ren are so strong that they can do whatever the fuck they want, and it doesn't matter because they're so strong with the Force that it doesn't matter. They can do whatever. They can hand matter. They can transport matter between each other. They're Jesus. They can heal people and like.
I think you've missed the obvious, and that's that. Rey is basically a Disney princess at this point. So whatever. That's
Yes,
about that's about it. Like, whatever.
I guess. I guess. So yeah. I mean, that whole thing is just a complete mess, in my opinion. That whole saga is a complete mess. Um, but back to the
Wait,
whole
wait.
Ray.
Can we talk about like Han? Oh, can we talk about Han Solo just appearing for some reason?
Okay, so that was apparently Kylo Ren's memory, and that was one of the fan service moments that I was talking about, where so like Han Solo appears, and God knows how much money they had to back up to Harrison's Ford house in a dump truck to fucking get him to do this again. But, he shows up as a memory of Kylo Ren to try and convince him to fucking turn back good.
I mean, I guess he's a memory.
Well, that's what they
That
said. They
wasn't
said he
really.
was. They said he was a memory in that flash or in that moment. Kylo goes
Yeah,
like, "Oh, you're just a memory," and Han's like, "Oh,
that's the
I'm your
only time that
memory."
has ever happened
What's that?
ever. That's the only time that's ever happened ever. So I guess it's again another thing.
Yeah, that's another thing that wasn't a thing until now, and now it's a thing because they decided it was going to be a thing with no adequate explanation. But, that was a minor thing. If we're talking about Kylo Ren, because I don't know if you were trying to feed into like Kylo Ren's quote unquote unexpected redemption at the end of the movie, um, but another thing, if you want to talk about that for a second, I mean, I guess we adequately bitched about, Rey not making it, the fact that Rey and her parentage makes absolutely no sense. And first, it's one
Also,
way.
like Ray is like even stronger in the Force. Like she can fucking pull a ship out of the sky
Yeah,
now too,
yeah,
and heal people, and
yep.
all these crazy Force powers that she's just
Jesus,
making up as she goes along.
Jesus. Yeah, there you go, ladies and
No,
gentlemen.
Jesus couldn't do all the powers. He could just do like I mean, he could walk on water, but it's not like he could like you know.
He
I
couldn't
mean, I'm
pull a
sure
star
maybe he
destroyer
could.
out of the sky.
Exactly. He didn't like pull this transport ship out of the sky. He only did like low level
He could have
superhuman
turned the
things.
fuel to wine.
He
Mm-hmm.
turned the starship fuel to wine. There you go.
Well, she,
So,
she almost turned Chewbacca. That was another thing. She
oh, the
almost turned
teasing the
Chewbacca
death of
into
Chewbacca. Like,
fire.
okay, I have to talk about this for a second, because actually this is one of the moments in the movie that I actually, looking back on it, don't even hate. That I kind of was just like, huh, they got me. But like, and because Mitch and I actually saw this movie together, and Mitch, you can attest to this. When they teased Chewbacca's death in this movie, like very early on, I literally was about to get up and walk out of the movie theater when they did that, because I was like, really,
Really?
really,
Oh, the
really.
fact that they did that too, like at the same time where they had Ray like have stronger Force lightning than like Kylo Ren. Uh,
Dude, I don't know. I'm gonna disagree with you on this because I actually thought that, and I think they totally fucked it up. because I thought that this was actually a good opportunity to actually give Rey some character, because we all know she doesn't have one. So, like, it would actually have given her some character development if she accidentally like killed like a beloved guy, a beloved hero, instead of her always like for some reason being perfect at everything,
Well,
right?
okay, so yeah, I can definitely understand your thought process there, but at the same time, like I'm so sore of all these horrible character
But
deaths.
then she wouldn't have been able to resist Palpatine with that guilt on her shoulders already. You know what I mean? I think, in my opinion.
That's why it would have made it interesting, because maybe she wouldn't have been able to, right? That's what would have made the movie more compelling. Because like if there was any ever a time in this movie where I actually felt, that was the other thing. This movie just feels like vapid of emotion. Like, to be honest, I felt more emotion watching Last Jedi than I felt watching this movie. And like it's
Huh.
so vapid of emotion. That's probably the only moment in this entire movie where I actually you actually felt something, where you're like, oh crap, Chewie died. Oh wait, no, they're just faking this out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy that he didn't die, so maybe that's why I'm biased about this because like after what they did after they did Luke dirty in The Last Jedi and obviously
But
in this
I'm saying
movie.
I wouldn't have liked it. I wouldn't have liked it. Luke's death was 100% pointless. But honestly, I feel like Chewie dying here could have been used as like, Rey fucked up for once. Rey actually did something wrong. Rey is actually getting character development. That's why I think it was a serious, like, I'm not saying I love the way they did it, but I'm
Mhm.
saying it was a serious missed opportunity for actually doing something interesting instead of just returning to the status quo.
Yeah, that's a fair point actually that I hadn't fully considered myself, but yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, if they would have done it with a like more of a minor character than and but actually let it stick, then I thought that that would have been fine actually. Um,
Yeah, let her kill Finn. They ruined him after The Force Awakens.
no, they can't kill her because he's one of her many love interests, which I want to talk about in a second, also, which makes no sense. But yeah, if they would have done it to like C-3PO or something, then sure. But
People loved 3PO. 3PO is great.
but
Like,
Chewie,
I
like
feel
okay,
like,
so I'm
honestly,
just so
3PO
raw
was
on like
probably the best
terrible character
character in
deaths
this
in the
movie.
Star Wars universe that like and the other one was I was going to bring up was Princess Leia, and granted I
Well, hold
understand
on.
That
that.
Side note, that's a real good point too, though, because even though C-3PO wasn't technically going to be killed, there was a moment where like he was, I'm saying, looking at my friends for one
They were
last
going to wipe his
time,
memory, and
and
they
then
didn't know if
like
they
they
were going to
did,
get it back.
and they did like the memory thing, and then I think it was our dude R2D2 who was able to like re-upload him, but like
Mhm.
Yeah,
you didn't think that was an opportunity, like John was saying, like another opportunity for something dramatic to happen because the movie was lacking these moments because they just kept getting fixed. So it's like they could have at least left C-3PO as like your basic protocol droid again, you know?
Well, it's funny you
yeah.
should say
That's the
that because
thing,
that's
is
what they
they
did at
love.
the end of Revenge of the Sith. Is they wiped his memory banks, so that would have almost kind of been like a callback to that, and it would have also been like a sacrifice of sorts. But no, but yeah, like you said again, no, they had to fix it. So
They just immediately undo it, so it's just like every decision and nothing has any impact, right? Like, Ray stabs Kylo, but she can just heal him up, so he's fine. Or like,
yeah.
Ray's supposedly dead, but Kylo can heal her now apparently. Or like Chewie's dead, but oh wait, no, he's not. Or C-3PO has to get his memory. Like, I don't know if you remember, but when we were talking about The Last Jedi, they had a ton of these stupid fake out moments where it was like they acted like something impactful was going to happen, but it's like, uh oh, guess what? It's just a fake out. It nothing. It was
How could I
actually
forget?
like.
Gotcha the movie. How could I forget?
Right. So this, like, honestly, this movie does that too, and it's infuriating.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. Is that like I feel like a certain degree of that is acceptable, but when your entire movie is that, then that's a big problem because then nothing
I mean,
like
it was a worse problem in Last Jedi, but in this movie, honestly, like, maybe it was because Last Jedi just made me so numb to it, but it's just like it's another addition to why this movie just has like no emotional impact. Like, seriously, like at the end of this movie, like at the end of Last Jedi, I was just like, huh. And there were a couple scenes where I was like, wow, I actually feel a little bit of emotion.
mhm.
Like some of the Luke scenes, and like, uh, I guess when they thought like all hope was lost when Finn was about to sacrifice himself, but then Rose completely ruined that scene.
Yeah.
Like, you feel a little bit of emotion in a couple scenes in Last Jedi, but in this movie, like
Well, I mean,
only
even when the one where like Kylo killed Solo. You know, like that was pretty heart
Well, that was
wrenching.
that was the only movie in this trilogy that was actually good. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that was in
so
Force Awakens, though. That was
yeah,
not in Last Jedi. But
Force
I'm saying, like,
Awakens.
even Last Jedi had a couple moments that made me feel something. And but this movie, I like honestly, like, you know
This
how they say
movie,
like
I think
movies
I think what
have like an
contributed to
emotional.
go ahead.
You know how they say movies have like an emotional core or whatever. I feel like this movie is just like emotionally vapid. It doesn't have like an emotional core. It's like there's nothing there.
Well, I think the thing for me with this movie, and this is somewhat related, is I feel like everything was just so disjointed, and we kind of touched on it before, but like I don't know if you felt this way, but when I was watching this movie, like the first like maybe 10 minutes or so of the movie just felt like so like frantic, like
Random.
rushed and like disjointed, like even more so than the average. Like they were trying to like cram so much in like a such a small time window to try and like get themselves to like a comfortable point that they could start taking their time again, and it just that's the way
Like I
I
don't know if
felt.
you've ever seen. I don't know if you've ever seen Mad Max Fury Road. Have you seen
No.
that? But that's like a movie that I would say I would describe as like frantic, but in a good way.
I've seen that movie. That movie's crazy.
Yeah, but I would say that movie is like frantic in a good way. You know what I mean? Like the whole movie just has this crazy pace, and I feel like this movie kind of
Oh
tried to
yeah,
pace
because it
itself
keeps
like
you
something
like
like that.
entrapped the whole time. You're like waiting for what's gonna happen the next.
Right. But I feel like this movie just like it throws so many like curveballs that it then like negates and makes pointless, and then it just derails itself constantly, and then like picks itself back up and puts itself back on the rails, but the rails don't go anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think to put it simply, and I think you said this after you watched it for the first time, Johnny, was that to put it simply, the movie is just a mess. Like it's just all over the place. Like you just have all this nonsense. You have no explanations. You have
It's not even like an emotional roller coaster type movie where
no.
it's like there's just so much stuff happens that it like affects you in all these different ways, or like something like Mad Max Fury Road where it's just like there's so much crazy stuff happening constantly that you're just getting constantly barraged by it that it's overwhelming in a good way. It's like there's just a bunch of random crap that doesn't make sense that kind of happens, right?
Yeah, that I think about sums it up. Um, yeah, I think that sums up the movie. I know we have some other specific stuff. So I mentioned
How about Finn's girlfriend, or not Finn's girlfriend? How about Finn's girlfriend and Poe's girlfriend? How about that?
Yeah, so I was gonna get into the romantic. That was just where I was going. Actually, is the romantic interests of this movie.
It's
Um,
almost like they felt they needed to pair everybody up with someone.
yeah, pointlessly, I might add, because yeah. So as far as Poe goes, like and one, I don't want to talk all negative about the movie. One thing that I did actually like about this movie is I feel like Poe was one of the few characters in this movie who was actually treated properly, and they actually gave him like character development and like appropriate, screen times and like storyline progression, and like they did relatively good things with him that made like relative sense. Not all of it, obviously, but I think of all the characters, they probably did right by him, probably the most,
I
if
think
not.
3PO. I think 3PO was actually done pretty well, other than that stupid like, oh, his mind's wiped and it's
Oh, the
not.
memory wipe tease, yeah. So, but as far as Poe goes,
But he
like
was
so
never
they
anything better than like a minor character.
right, but so yeah, so like they teased like, or they brought up like he apparently had like some shady past where he was like a kind of sort of criminal, kind of, I guess. Um,
No, he was a spice trader.
Whatever. So they close enough. So they did that, and
So
then
I think that was the joke, though, is they kind of made it seem like he had a shady criminal past, but it turned out he was just like a lame ass spice trader, and that's why he was just kind of like embarrassed by it.
yeah. So but he had like this ex girlfriend, like bitter ex girlfriend and shit, and like he tries to like get back with her, and it doesn't work, and like yeah. So but they're still kind of paired up, and then with Finn, like they pair him up with I don't even remember her name. Yeah, that other character. And it's just so there's
Captain
like
Phasma.
yeah, no, not Phasma. That's one character that actually died and stayed dead. But
Her
so
name is her name is Sidon Athan. Wait, no, this isn't right. Hold up, I'll find it. Hold up, go ahead, keep going.
sure. So my point is, I agree with you in the sense that there were a lot of like kind of sort of but not really weird romances that were like teased in this movie, and
Zori.
there you go. And furthermore, there were actually in the Star Wars franchise as a whole, because this is what I touched on earlier that I wanted to bring up, is the whole Rey love interest thing has jumped around so much and made no sense, and they just took that to the next level in this movie. So, as a brief synopsis, real quick, um, in The Force Awakens, which, as I said, and I stand by this, is the only movie in this trilogy that I could actually say was good. Um, in that movie, it's painfully obvious that they're teasing a Rey and Finn love interest, right? It's painfully obvious. So in The Last Jedi, they basically throw that completely out the window and they tease a Rey and Kylo love interest for the majority of that movie. Yet at the very end of that movie, they tease a Rey and Poe love interest for seemingly no reason whatsoever. Then in this movie, in the very beginning of this movie, they once again tease a Rey and Poe love interest where they're like fighting like an old married couple in the beginning of the movie, again seemingly for no
I
reason.
thought they
Because
were teasing. I thought they were teasing a Poe and Finn love interest.
yeah, the internet would. I know you're joking right now, but like
No,
the
I'm
internet.
100% serious.
What's that?
I'm 100% serious.
Oh God, I didn't think that for a second, but apparently the internet did. But anyway, so that's what I thought, and then again trying to zero in on Rey because she's our main character. Um, you know, then toward the middle of the movie, they go back to teasing the Rey and Finn love interest, and it's like when they're sinking in the quicksand, and like Finn's like, I have to tell you something, and then they don't die, and then he's like, I'll tell you later, and then he later never comes apparently, so because that made a world of sense, and then at the end of the movie, obviously they're teasing, or when in the scene where Rey kills Kylo, but then unkills him because she can do that now because she's Jesus. Then they tease the Rey and Kylo love interest again, and then as it turns out, at the end of the movie, they actually go through with the Rey and Kylo, or Reylo as the internet likes to call them. Um, you know, where they get their moment and they kiss, where Kylo dies and whatever. But it's like my point is like throughout
Okay,
this entire
yeah.
trilogy, like it's just been all over. Like the romance has been all over the place, or the tease of the romance angle has been all over the place for the main
I
character.
just want to say this: that Ray is like the most non-sexual person like
Yes,
in any movie I've ever seen. Like she's like a fucking plank of wood. Like
she's a robot.
seriously. Yeah, like I mean,
She
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 doesn't.
she, she
I never get any kind of idea like she's a real human being that actually is like interested in other human beings. You know what I mean?
I will
Like
I will agree with that almost completely, but the one exception I have to that is like it feels to me like she has shown like in certain points in certain movies she's shown like a romantic interest in Kylo. That I can say
not really.
like
I think it's
not
like kind of
not
like an
super
awkward.
strong, but to some small
I
degree
think
I've
it's more
sensed that.
like I think it's more like an awkward like she's uncomfortable around him. That's more what it seems like to me.
Yeah, but she's uncomfortable around him because she likes him. Yeah.
I think she's uncomfortable around him because he's a fucking weird emo kid.
Well, that
Like
could be it too. Who knows? But yeah. So that's kind of my point is that like there's no clear like anything in these movies really. It just as far as that goes, it's just like it's all over the place. It's like they're changing their mind like every movie, like multiple times a movie. The only one of these movies that had any semblance of like sense or order or consistency with it was The Force Awakens.
I
But
think this is
we're
what we should
kind of
do right now.
zeroing.
We should throw it to Mitch and have Mitch book the entirety of Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker if he's working just off the Force Awakens. Go.
What the? Here's the thing.
Yeah.
I think the reason again, and I agree with what you said, John, about how there was a lot in this movie that like the director unfortunately had to try to clean up, as far as what's previously went on. But I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like the movie, the only reason it sucked was because of the lack of information, and I think that it's not the only one out of the three that's had like that lack of information. I mean, I think we said this before, me and Bernard, about how we didn't even know Leia was a Jedi.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up actually, because that was I knew there was a couple things that I was forgetting because I do at some point want to move to talking about kind of the legacy that this sequel trilogy has left behind. But that's a big one for me as far as this movie goes. Is so toward the middle of the end of this movie, we find out that Leia apparently was a Jedi, and Luke had trained Leia to be a Jedi following the events of Return of the Jedi, the episode 6, and that she had abandoned, I guess, her training or whatever when she had a vision of her son, which would have then become Kylo Ren, doing something. I don't even remember what it was, either killing her or killing Han or doing something bad.
Becoming a pussy ass bitch.
Yeah, something like that. Being emo, who knows? But but yeah, and that's when she abandoned her training. But okay, so this brings up, this is actually something that I've thought about that brought up a huge plot hole as far as the trilogy as a whole is concerned. So in The Force Awakens, we're told the entire movie, the loosely, that everyone's looking for Luke Skywalker because he is quote unquote the last Jedi, and they need to find, and Kylo wants to find him and kill him because he's the last Jedi, and the good guys want to find him because he's the only hope of defeating Kylo because he's the last Jedi, right? Then in The Last Jedi, that plot continues to Luke being quote unquote the last Jedi, and that he's the only way
Even
that
though it
Rey can
makes
get.
no sense because he's cut himself off from the Force and doesn't consider himself a Jedi anymore. But that's a problem with Last Jedi and not this movie. So continue.
Yes, you're right. But yeah, so and Ray's like begging him to train her because no one else can do it, and X, Y, and Z because he is quote
And she
unquote
wants
the
that too.
last Jedi. Then he dies in the most unceremonious of ways in The Last Jedi, and then in this movie, in the beginning, we find out that Leia is training Rey because surprise, surprise, she's a Jedi. So that raises all these questions and inconsistencies, such as, okay, in The Force Awakens now, if Leia was a Jedi the whole time, why couldn't Leia confront Kylo Ren? He was her son after all. So, and even, okay, and then even if Leia was too maybe old or weak to fight, why couldn't Leia have trained a new Jedi to stand up to Kylo Ren? Because she was a Jedi herself and trained in those ways. And it's like it just doesn't make any sense. And then again, in The Last Jedi, if Luke was going to be a dick and not want to train Rey to stand up to Kylo Ren or do it himself, why couldn't Leia do it? Because she was also a Jedi. So it completely invalidates like that entire arc that ran for two straight movies of Luke is the only one left who knows the ways of the Jedi, when no, he wasn't. Leia did the whole time apparently, and
Hey,
only
wait a minute.
now.
Hey, hold up. Hold
Go
up.
ahead.
Don't you worry about that because hey, look, there's Lando.
Yes. I can't do his laugh, but you get it. You get it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that actually wasn't that bad actually.
Yeah. So, but yeah. So that's. But it just doesn't make.
You old pirate.
Yeah. Get going, you old pirate. But yeah. But that was. Like it just that entire story arc literally invalidated the running story arc of the
I still
previous two movies.
so that's 100% true, but I feel like that's way more thought than anybody involved in this movie would ever put into it. And
Yeah.
let's talk about Lando because this is the perfect time to do that.
Yes, is. So Lando, obviously we all love Lando, but I will say, and then, I'll let you talk about it, but I will say that his involvement in this movie, the way that they did it and the way they wrote him in was nonsensical to say the least.
Well, I would say he could have been more. He could. I mean, there's so many places they just had him show up. First of all, like what is their obsession with just like having people show up in random locations that is like extremely convenient that they just so happen to be there? That's been like this in this entire trilogy. That happens all the time. Even
Like
Force
when he
Awakens is
came out of
not.
like the shadow in the one scene,
Yeah, when
like
they're
they were
at that
talking in there.
festival thing, and then like Lando just like pops out of a random fucking tent for no reason, and that's his intro.
Yeah, I mean, how small is this galaxy?
Pretty small, I guess. I don't
It's the
know.
size. It's seriously like the size of like the freaking village in New York. Like really, like it's like that's
I
the whole
guess.
galaxy.
I guess. I don't know. It just. Yeah. So, but anyway, continue.
Yeah, but like, I mean, could you? Let's just brainstorm some things that Lando could have, some other places that Lando could have shown up that would have been like way more interesting. Like, I mean, he could have shown up in the
Like a
Last Jedi as that.
cemetery or something. Like,
No, they
re-
didn't. They
re-
didn't want to kill him off. Fortunately, they. He. I guess I was wrong because I did say in one of
the
our last.
black guy doesn't die in this movie.
Yeah,
Yeah. No.
they had to reverse the status quo.
Well, yeah, because I actually said in our podcast with Mitch a couple months ago, I when we found out Lando was coming back in this movie, I had kind of predicted they were going to kill him off because hey, they killed everybody else, so why not kill him too? But he did make it out
I'm
alive, so I
actually
was surprised.
that's the one good thing that Lando didn't die. But
There you
you know,
go.
I
That,
mean, he had so many other options that I mean, he could have done. He really didn't do anything, and he really didn't have like the Lando swagger anymore. I saw someone in a different review because I watched several reviews of Rise of Skywalker where they said that he just seems like your kind of like geriatric grandfather who's just kind of happy to be there. Like, hey, I'm back, guys. I just want to hang out and with all the young kids. Right? That's like pretty much what
yeah.
he was doing. Right?
I got my day pass from the nursing home.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
pretty
seriously.
much. Yeah, I mean, yeah, they did do him wrong in this. Like they couldn't have had him show up in the capacity of like, oh, hey, I was one of the generals in the war, 30 years ago against the Empire, so now I'm back to help you guys.
All they no, what they were missing was the fact that like Lando was actually a Jedi too, and he was training Finn, who kept
Yeah.
talking about how like he feels the Force
No,
the whole movie. It's crazy.
he trained that worm that Ray healed.
Oh yeah.
The Jesus just I just don't understand.
Can we talk about how unnecessary that scene was?
Oh, you mean the
It,
scene where
it
Uh,
was
they
just
sink in the
when she
quicksand and they go into
when
the
she heals
cave?
the wound. It just existed for them to like show that Ray has the ability to heal things. It was
That,
so
but dude, I
contrived.
compared that to like the thorn and the lion, and the mouse pulls it out, and the lion's like, I guess I won't eat you.
Oh yeah,
Well, that is
true.
what they were going for there. Just another way to Jesusify Rey for no apparent reason, but also to kind of that was like their intro to oh now Rey all of a sudden has this power that she can heal people and shit. So there's that. Um, but yeah,
Yeah, but
like
I feel like Lando could have been anything, but he
Yeah,
was
but
not.
anyone else tries to use that power and they die, especially when they use it on Ray.
Because it's unnatural.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So to kind of go back to finish the thought on Lando, like yeah, they could have
It's
they
fucked up too because it's like that's supposed to be like a dark side power if you think about it. Because Palpatine was all like, "Yeah, I can help you save Padme and shit."
Have you ever
And
heard the
yeah.
story of Darth Maggot's lies?
oh god.
I'm just saying, if that was even possible, why would he like? I don't know why would Ben Solo, if he's supposed to be like omnipotent, like Ray, just like, I
Why
guess I'm
didn't
just gonna,
Why didn't Luke heal Darth Vader at the end of Return of the Jedi?
You didn't know how. You didn't know how.
I'll save you, Father.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if Ray can pull it out of her ass, why fucking couldn't Luke?
Well, see, that's just yeah. I mean, I don't know. I just it's another thing that doesn't make sense. But to try and finish the thought on Lando, I'll say this: I agree with you in the sense. Yes, there are a lot of ways they could have used him in really any facet, and rather than using him in a productive facet, that's why what I was kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about the fan service kind of being hit or miss in this movie, and with Lando it
They
was
just
kind of
weren't.
like. oh yeah, it's
It
cool
was
to
just
see him again, but like they didn't really use him in a productive way, especially in the beginning. Like he just shows up for no
It would have
reason.
been perfect opportunity for them to bust out like, okay, so um Kylo gets Anakin or Leia's saber, because that's his mom,
Hmm.
hmm
and then fucking um Ray gets Luke's green saber, which we haven't seen, or vice versa. Even if like, she was like a daughter to Leia, and then like it kind of shows that he forgave Luke for what he like tried to do to him. Like while wielding the green saber, he tried to do it with. You know what I mean? Like
Okay, so
something like that. I don't know.
I'm gonna go on a rant here for just a second here because okay, I am so mad at like where the fuck did Luke's god damn it. I'm so mad I can't even talk. Where did Luke's green lightsaber go? Why is that
Well,
not a
he
thing
obviously
anymore?
stuck it up his ass and decided to. Yeah,
I guess that's what happened to because it just ceased to exist apparently. Like
Oh, I know. When he got to the island he went to exile himself, he just nonchalantly threw it off the cliffside.
damn it.
that's what Ryan Johnson would have done.
uh, god damn it. Yeah. Yeah, that probably did happen. But yeah, but it just bothers me so much because like, and I know
Again,
this is more
much
of a
less
personal thing.
important. Much less important. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's not that important. I know it's just a personal thing, but like I really like the green lightsaber is my favorite kind, as you can tell by my very low quality thumbnail here. Um, but yeah, I don't understand like where because and maybe to a degree it doesn't make sense because in the new trilogy of these movies, they've made such a big deal about lightsabers and like whose lightsaber goes where and where it came from and where it's going and who's doing what with it.
I
And
told you where it went up his ass.
I know, but I get it. But like, what I'm saying is like, for whatever reason, they make such a big deal about Anakin's lightsaber, and now Princess Leia's lightsaber that apparently existed that we just found out about now, and
I mean, if
whatever
it's
else.
convenient for the story, it's got to be there.
Yeah, but his green saber just doesn't exist anymore for no reason. I don't get it. It's stupid, but whatever. It's the
What
least of
happened to
our
Darth Vader's
worries.
lightsaber?
What's that?
What happened to Darth Vader's lightsaber?
They got blown up on the Death Star, I'm sure. But oh yeah, side note of Kylo Ren's tossing his specific special lightsaber into the ocean there. I mean, I guess he wasn't thinking about like the littering laws or like the fact that a little kid could find it and put his eye out with it. I
He
think
had the coolest lightsaber. I
yeah, and he
wasn't
just
sold on that thing at first, but
well, that's
it
another
grew
minor
on me.
plot hole. Is like he throws it away as like a symbolic gesture that he's not going to be Kylo Ren anymore, and then he just like charges in with no weapon to try and like help Rey fight Palpatine, and it's like, oh yeah, I probably could have, used my lightsaber that I threw away. I mean, even if it's red and I'm not evil anymore, it's still like, still would help me not die. But
No,
okay,
because it's evil.
but
You
I guess
can't use
we're on
that,
the. I
right?
guess while
Like you
we're on
know.
the subject, I have to talk about Kylo Ren and the whole like Kylo Ren redemption arc and the way that it played out in this movie, real quick. So
There's so many problems with this movie. I feel like we
yes,
said the exact same thing with Last Jedi.
yeah. I mean, there at least this movie has certain silver linings to it, which we kind of mentioned, but like that, which Last Jedi
But I
didn't.
honestly, I mean, but does it? Like, I feel like Last Jedi and this, like, I feel like, I mean, Last Jedi kind of broke the Star Wars universe, but like this movie just it tried to fix it, but like, okay, I can say this: I appreciate in a way, in retrospect, the fact that Last Jedi at least kind of tried to do something bold, even if it kind of like utterly failed.
Mm-hmm.
But like this movie tried to like fix things, and it would just did it like so incompetently, and like
Mm-hmm.
it brought up a bunch of other new problems in addition to that,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I'm actually finding it hard to really say that I can definitively call this better than Last Jedi.
That's a sad thought, and I can't completely disagree with it. But trying to zero in on Kylo Ren here. So okay, so again, looking at Kylo Ren's progression in this trilogy, it's like okay, in the first movie, he decided to be evil for some unknown reason. Maybe you think, oh, he just got tricked by Snoke or whatever. Then in the second movie, in The Last Jedi, you find out that apparently Luke tried to murder him in cold blood for no reason, and that's his real reason for
Totally
being
out of character.
real reason for being evil. So now at this point you're like, oh, can you really even blame Kylo Ren for being evil? Because it's like his master tried to murder him in cold blood, for his uncle no less tried to murder him in cold blood for no reason. So it's like, what the fuck? And then
He
in this,
saw that it's because he saw that he was going to become an emo bitch.
oh my
So he was
god.
like, "Ain't no son of mine," even though he's not my son.
Yeah. So then you have that, and then in this movie, this is what gets me about his redemption in this movie, because I think we all kind of felt that like there was going to be like Kylo Ren redemption in this movie. Like that was kind of what
Can,
I
can,
was.
can I just say what I was actually hoping for in this movie was I was actually hoping that Rey would go to the dark side and kill Kylo Ren, and then the dark side wins. I thought that would have been a really interesting way to take it. I knew it wasn't going to happen, but I was thinking that would be pretty cool.
I think that actually would have been interesting. It's funny you should say that, because I was thinking, not to go back to The Last Jedi again, which we always inevitably go back to because of how it broke the Star Wars universe. But I was actually thinking it would have been an interesting way to end that movie if, like, at the end, after they do that fight in the throne room, how if like when Kylo extends his hand to Rey, that she takes it and joins him, and they both become evil, and that would have set up a much more interesting arc for this last movie that we just had than what we did have. But I digress. So, but with Kylo, it's like, okay, he's evil, he's evil. He goes to kill. It's like, okay, in the beginning of the movie, he goes to kill Palpatine because he views Palpatine as a threat to his superiority or his rule or whatever. And then Palpatine somehow convinces him, oh, you don't need to kill me, you just need to kill Rey, and then I'll give you all the power in the world, right? So then he goes to kill Rey, but then he decides that I never wanted to, he tells Rey, oh, I never wanted to kill you all along. We can take Palpatine down together. And then I'm just thinking, like, why didn't you just kill Palpatine then when you had your lightsaber
Well,
pointed at him in the fucking
he
cave?
probably he probably realized he wasn't strong. I don't know. Maybe he realized he wasn't strong. I thought it was actually pretty like the one thing I'll say about this movie is in the beginning they almost had me. I was almost sold on thinking like in the first like 5 minutes. You know how you said it was like so hectic and
Yeah.
everything was like all over the place.
Hmm.
I actually thought, and I can't believe I thought this, but for about 5 minutes, I actually thought that was like, holy shit, they're somehow going to tie this all together and make it work, and they didn't. But
Yeah.
like at the same time, I thought it was really badass of Kylo Ren to just like show up and be like, "I'm gonna fucking kill Palpatine," right?
Yeah.
I thought that was really badass. But then he just goes bitch
He
mode and
bitches
becomes
out.
a subordinate,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, he just
Yeah.
bitches out, and it's like, what the fuck? But yeah, but then it gets even worse, because then he has this fight, he has it out with Ray, and the reason
Loses.
he loses, and I know this was a big sticking point for you, Mitch, when we watched this, was that the reason Kylo Ren loses this fight to Ray is because he hears Leia in her dying words, like calling out to him through the Force somehow.
Yeah.
That's better than Mary Poppins.
She's all like, I just need a minute to lay down and reach out to my son.
Hmm.
And then, like, I brought up the point, how come every time a fucking Skywalker uses any kind of force projection, like, they just die?
Guess they should probably stop doing that.
Yeah, yeah, I would think so. I mean, they literally, like it. I mean, I didn't. I guess, yeah, Carrie Fisher being gone, bless her heart, it makes sense. But at the same time, it's like, why does it always have to be in that manner?
Yeah.
Why does it always have to be like, I'm gonna reach out really far to somebody, and it's gonna take so much of my energy that it's gonna kill me. So,
See, okay, so
but
let me say this.
and
I
then
don't even
all
think
she says is his name. And then, like,
that's the
all she
problem.
says is his name. Like, she doesn't even say anything, like, thoughtful, thought out. It's
Yeah, but
just...
Carrie Fisher is dead. They can't record new.
They could splice some
You know,
shit together.
But, yeah, they can
Okay,
splice audio together, though. Like, I think that's just... I mean,
that's
I
a cop
get
out.
maybe it's out of respect, not like just making up something for her to say, but at the same time, like respect for the fan base. Like, hello,
Yeah,
you know
yeah,
what I
okay.
mean?
So this is what I have to say. I have to pick up on what you said and 100% say that my problem with this whole thing is not even that that's the way that they killed Princess Leia off, because I'm fine with that. What I am not fine with is the fact that, like, she didn't, like you said, they didn't have her say anything thoughtful or meaningful or anything. They just have her say his name, and that's enough to, like,
Hmm.
freeze him in his tracks so that Rey can kill him before she unkills him, obviously. But
Well, I think that I actually find it kind of interesting that they set it up that Kylo beat Rey, except for that thing, because it was basically like Kylo had her bested, which I actually thought was like good because like why would he not have her bested? She never trained in anything. He's like a descendant of Luke Skywalker, who is supposedly one of the greatest Jedi's of all time, and he was also trained by Luke Skywalker, and he was also trained by Snoke, and he was also like now like under Palpatine. So like, why would he lose to Rey? It doesn't make any sense why he would ever lose to Rey, right?
yep, yeah,
But
yeah,
she's Jesus,
yeah. Well, aside from that,
I mean,
that's
besides plot armor and that.
yeah. Aside,
and
aside
like
from that.
all that she has to do is like imagine something, and like she can imagine his lightsaber out of his hand and put it in hers.
Or she can imagine her lightsaber into his hand at the end of the movie to save him.
That happened, apparently. I mean, or
That's
did it?
not now. You can just pass shit through the force. What's that? You can do that. You can do that without dying, but you can't. You can't talk to somebody, I guess, telepathically.
Yeah, yes, I didn't even realize that until now. Now apparently you can transport matter through the force between each other, but you can't talk to somebody or else you're dead.
Yeah, you're
I
you're
think they're
fucked.
just trying to show you how much stronger Rey is than Leia because she's so awesome. Rey's way stronger than Luke or Leia or
Y-
anyone ever.
Yeah. So okay. So but yeah, to close that thought, all the respect in the world to Carrie Fisher, rest her. But
I mean,
you know,
enough respect.
yeah, you know what I mean. But the point that I'm trying to make is that they could have, in my opinion, or even and here's something that would have been really simple that would have
Okay,
made that scene
I
work a
gotta say
million
this.
times better.
I had one of my clients tell me that they said that Slave Leia was not hot, and I'm like, okay, listen, you got a problem.
Well, yes, you're right. Yes, I agree with you there. But in the beginning of this movie,
Tell that to the many boxes of tissues and bottles of lotion that
Right. We're used up by that.
yeah, or all the costumes at Comic Cons and all that kind of stuff. But okay, my point is this:
yeah.
in the beginning of this movie, you have Leia telling Rey never something to the effect of "never forget who you are," or, that kind of something like that to try and inspire her to like move on. So how hard would it have been to just have her say that to Kylo in that moment and just say Ben, never forget who you are or something like that, and that could have been the tip over for him to realize like, oh man, I'm bad, I shouldn't be bad. But no, it's just his name, and that's it.
I
Okay.
guess they like maybe that's all they had.
But they could have just used the audio that they used in the beginning of the movie where she tells Ray, "Never forget who you are."
That would
Like,
have
what
been
the
kind of
fuck?
cheesy though.
They could have easily just used, and it would have made sense because it's like, okay, she's telling her son the same thing she told Ray, and it worked for Ray, and then it kind of worked for him too. And oh my god, it's
Yeah,
see stuff.
never forget that you're a Palpatine.
It's just things that irritate me the most are the stuff that would have been really easy, simple changes that to a movie that they could have made, such as this. Because in my mind, there's just no reason not to do it. It's just it would have made everything make so much more sense. And here's another example of that while I'm on the subject of, little things that this movie could have done to make more sense. In the beginning of this movie, we get the whole, thing like the words in space about how Palpatine's back and he's going to blah 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 and whatever. But among other things, it's never adequately explained or explored why now all of a sudden Palpatine is back. So how hard would it have been to simply to have in that beginning, writing or paragraphs to simply say Palpatine has declared that now that Luke Skywalker is dead, it's time for him to return and rule the galaxy again because Luke defeated him last time in a sense in Return of the Jedi, even though technically it was Vader. But that Palpatine was biding his time all this time, waiting for Luke to die, and now that Luke is dead, it's his time to rise again. Like they couldn't even do something as simple as that would have made this ridiculous shit just make a little
With a
more sense.
little more sense. Yeah.
Yes. They can't even do that. And that bothers me probably just as much as the huge plot holes. There's little stuff like that they could have done to make things make
we,
just a little more sense, and they didn't
we
do it.
we didn't even talk about like the fact that like they just so happened to run into a random tribe of like water buffalo wielding former stormtroopers who like, oh yeah, let's give Finn like a love interest all of a sudden. It's not Rey because we're just gonna abandon that plot thread.
Yeah, that was really dumb too, highly improbable. I think there's just so many things, and I'm trying to hit just the ones that really stick out to me in my mind.
What about Poe's like random girlfriend? Because they're like, oh well, we can't have Poe, have a story that makes sense. So let's just add another character.
I mean, I thought his story, aside from that, I thought his story kind of did make sense more than a lot of the other
But can we
characters.
all just talk about how Babu Frick is like the only good new character?
Yes, that guy is hilarious. That is that. See, that's what I mean when I say there's a silver lining somewhere in this movie, and that character was great. So
Yeah, there's a couple good things about the movie,
yeah.
like Babu Frick probably being the only one.
Yeah, he's definitely in the world of disposable side comic relief characters. He's definitely the top, especially when it comes to
Yeah,
this movie.
he's up there with like that penis head guy in Jabba's palace.
Yeah, yeah, he is. So,
and
um,
and what's his name? The two guys at the cantina where he's like, "I'm wanted in 7 star systems."
oh, Pig Nose and Scott,
God, yeah.
as Family Guy would say, but you know, um, but yeah, I don't know if I really have anything else too much to say about the Rise of Skywalker specifically. I think we touched on most of the major things. I don't know, Johnny, if you have anything else that you think we haven't really talked about the Rise of Skywalker as a whole.
Oh, there's actually one thing that I we did not talk about at all, and that was Huck.
Who?
Huck,
Who's Huck?
General Huck.
Oh, General Hux. You know what? I actually, as a side note, I actually kind of enjoyed that whole subplot that folded out because they laid the seeds. They're like, oh, there's a traitor on board and he's giving information and blah blah
But
blah. And then
like everything else they set up, it went nowhere.
yeah, but
He's just, oh,
yeah,
he's dead
exactly.
now.
But that was one thing
It's
that
like,
they
oh, he's
actually
dead now.
maybe that's why we were forgetting about it is because that's one thing they set up that actually did go somewhere. It's like, oh, Poe and Finn are about to be executed, and then Hux just saves them, and then he's like, oh yeah, I'm the traitor because I hate Kylo Ren because he's been doing nothing but belittling me and usurping my authority and making my life hell for the past 2.5 movies. So now I've
But
decided I'm finally.
why would that make him join the resistance? Wouldn't that make or why would that make him help the resistance? Wouldn't that just you know
That would make him up the
wouldn't he
resistance because he's
rather
sick of Kylo's shit, so it makes sense.
wouldn't he rather just like be like oust him to the fucking first order and have them get rid of Kylo or something?
No, but Kylo like
Like
is the first
like
order now after Snoke is
order
dead.
66 order 67 his ass.
Yeah, yeah. Hux just has to program all the stormtroopers who are not clones, by the way, in with
Mhm.
Order 67 to kill Kylo Ren, and then there you go. But
Exactly.
but yeah, that would have been so much easier, right? But yeah, I actually thought that actually made sense, and I enjoyed it. And then he just gets blown away for his troubles by some other B side fucking
I feel like that
guy.
was just a lazy excuse to get rid of him, and it that was about it.
Well, okay, so I didn't like that they just like because they kind of made him
Oh,
out to be a
also,
semi-important
yeah, go ahead.
character, so the way they just kind of like swept him under the rug and killed him was kind of dumb. But I thought that
I
like
mean,
the
they did
way.
that with Luke Skywalker, so I guess they can do that with anyone.
Well, I was just gonna say if they killed Luke the way that they killed him, then anyone else is not going to be as bad by comparison, no matter how horrible their death is. But aside from the way that they just ended him and swept him under the rug, I thought that whole thing actually about him like betraying the First Order and like helping them actually did make sense. So I enjoyed that. Um, but but yeah, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add aside from that. Johnny?
Uh, there was one other thing that I was thinking of, but I forgot what it was. Shit, it was something to do with Hux. Uh, no, Luke. What were we talking about?
How about the fact that like Palpatine was like a body on like a crane?
Yeah, we already kind of talked about that and how nonsensical and ridiculous that was.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, if you really want to
You want to
touch
talk about
base
that some
on
more?
something
I mean,
that's like,
we are getting up there in time, but yeah, I guess we can spend a little more time talking about how absurd that was.
and then like he sucks the life force or the force itself out of Rey and Kylo, and then like turns into like, and how he would say, "Oh, I contain 1,000 Siths." Like, what? I don't know. We don't have to really touch on it, but that was something that just kind of I wanted to
Everything
say
I
that
think
that was one of my
in one of the big sins of this
Yeah,
movie, we've lumped in
it's
like
just another
everything having
thing
to
that
do with
happened.
Palpatine.
Yeah, it's just another thing that happened with no explanation.
Yeah,
That's it.
yeah, it's just
And
yeah.
yeah, there's just so many of those in this movie. It's just a thing happened, no explanation. Who cares? Moving on. Oh, this is what I want to say. How did this Finn's girlfriend? It just so happens to have a magical coin that like is like a get out of jail free card to get past any like
You
freaking
mean Poe's
first
girlfriend?
order thing. Yeah, Poe's girrend. Sorry,
Yeah,
she
Poe's
just has some
girlfriend, but
magic.
not girlfriend, had a
Poe's
magical get
girlfriend,
out of jail
his
free
wannabe
card.
girlfriend.
Yes,
Yeah, like what did that? It's like talk about like it's literally like
plot armor. It's just plot armor.
you are literally saying like this is the plot device. Here, have plot device. Move to point B. Like
Yeah, that was
that's
pretty
like the
much that scene.
laziest, poorest writing ever. And like the stormtroopers, they're like, oh look, random old junky ass ship just lands on our star destroyer. Not gonna really think about that. Let's send out like two stormtroopers, right?
Yeah.
Like I mean, they're going on like some mission, and then all of a sudden this junky ass ship from like 50 years ago shows up, and nobody thinks anything of it, right?
Yeah, no, why would they? You know, it doesn't
Just
make.
just
Why would
another,
they?
like I said, just another thing that happens with no explanation.
Yeah, so I think that pretty
That's
well wraps.
that's like should be the title of this movie is things that happen with no explanation. That's like the theme of this movie.
Yeah, yeah, I think I would definitely agree with that completely. But I think that wraps up like the specifics of the Rise of Skywalker. Even though I know we've been kind of our assessment of this has kind of been all over the place, much like the movie. Um,
It's
but
hard to like address a movie where the plot thread is like it's more akin to like a child's scribbles than an actual like written out story.
yeah, you let me down here, J.J. Abrams. Although again, in all fairness,
I mean, he
you
did
were
write
screwed.
Lost.
You
I
were
mean, come
screwed
on,
from
try
day
to make
one.
sense of
And
that.
what's that?
I mean, he did Lost. Like, try to make sense of that.
Yeah, I mean, he was screwed from day one, honestly. And another thing I want to mention as a side note about this movie is I heard that apparently he was supposed to have 3 more months than he did to work on this, and they cut him short. So, they fought like he
Who
got fucked
cares? I could
over.
come up with a better story in 3 minutes than he came up with. Instead of Palpatine coming back, what actually happened is that kid with the broomstick at the end of the movie turns into a Sith, and all of a sudden has a ton of powers. He takes over the Force Order. He does not have Death Star technology because that is really played out. Instead, he runs a political campaign to take over the galaxy. This kid's now the leader of the entire galaxy and the head of the Sith. He gets Rey to
Broomstick
join him.
boy.
Then they Yeah, he gets Rey to join him. They swap the factions where Rey's now bad, Kylo's now good, and that's the epic final battle.
So
And
Ray and
Rey
Broomstick Boy
wins.
are bad, and Kylo's good. That's the one.
Exactly. That's it. I just made that up, pulled that straight out of my ass. That was a better plot thread than the whole movie.
Yeah, actually, you said something and now I forgot about it because I was laughing. That it was a point that another point I was gonna address, but, uh, God, yeah. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
this movie
Sigh.
was all over the place, as our assessment of
I
it
think I would
was
give this movie. I'll give this movie a big old sigh out of 10.
5 out of 10.
A big old sigh out of 10.
Thigh out of 10.
Like.
Oh, a sigh out of 10. Yeah, I get it. A
Yeah.
sigh out of 10. Haha. Yes. Yeah. I mean, like I
Not
said,
not not Psy, the Korean pop artist.
yeah.
God,
But yeah, as far as the Rise of Skywalker specifically goes, I mean, it kind of it's just all over the place. Like I said, there's some good points, there's some good action, but there's just not a lot of sense to be made of this movie.
Oh, some of
And
the scenes are freaking amazing in this movie. Like honestly, the Palpatine Temple is like, it's really cool.
yep,
But I mean,
it doesn't make any sense
the
why or how
shots
it's
are
there,
just like,
but it's a
yeah,
really
and the
cool
shots because it
place.
lasts like, you know how in the first Star Wars how they would do those like long shots of like Luke gazing longingly at the two sons of Tatooine,
Hmm.
and in this movie it's like you see this amazing Sith weird upside down pyramid temple thing,
Hmm.
and but like it's only there for like 3 seconds, and then
Yeah.
you move on, and it gets no explanation. It's there for 3 seconds and it's gone. There's like
Yeah.
so many like really well done, well designed like scenes and set pieces that's like they're there for 3 seconds and then they're gone, and you never see them again.
Yeah, yeah. Sadly, that is true. Oh, I know what I was talking about. I was talking about JJ getting cut short 3 months. On that's where I was on the
Yeah,
production or whatever. And yeah, I mean,
we've
you can s-
digressed
you can
so
argue
many
how
times,
much of
much
a
like the
difference
plan of the
that would have
movie.
made. Probably not a lot because you're just after what you were the act you were following with this movie. It just wasn't going to be. It was going to be a mess. It was bound to be a mess. But I can appreciate that at least there were some good things about it. There were some things I enjoyed, and it was a fun ride, I guess, overall. But I don't know, Mitch, if you want to kind of weigh in about your just kind of overall feeling or thought about this movie as a whole, The Rise of Skywalker.
I mean, I'd have to give it the same rating John did.
A sigh out of 10.
Out of 10.
I think we're all kind of in agreement with that for maybe little, slightly different reasons. But yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
I won't.
I've never
I
had a
can't
movie.
agree with. I can't agree with the fact that he said like he has trouble between this and the Last Jedi, because in my opinion, nothing will ever, ever come close to that for me. But I mean, it's the.
Even if I did not like The Last Jedi, I can like it's like this. I can appreciate if I have like two people, right, and one person I just feel like is just like a total fuck up on everything, but then like the other guy was like he's also a total fuck up, but at least he tried to do something like unique. That's how I see. Like I'm like I see like Last Jedi was like this movie and Last Jedi, to be honest, were both like complete failures. But I feel like Last Jedi at least tried to do something unique. This movie just tried to like pick up the pieces and it just dropped them all.
Yeah, I mean, I can
Yeah,
understand that.
the unique thing they tried to do was kill Luke Skywalker. So I can't.
Even if it was terrible and I don't like it, like I said, I still in some way I can kind of appreciate at the base level that they at least like had some kind of like vision for the movie that was like if I say what was the vision of Last Jedi, it's kind of like, your parentage or your lineage doesn't matter and anybody can like be great. Now how well they actually did that, I don't think it was very well done. But for this movie, I'm like, what's like the message or like what's like the overarching plot? It's just a bunch of random shit that happened with no explanation.
Yeah, I could
Yeah,
see that.
yeah, I can understand that. I mean, to me, it doesn't make the Last Jedi sting any less, but I can definitely understand that line of thought.
I feel like the Last Jedi, if I were to say it like succinctly, was a bad idea that was bold. At least it was bold, but it was poorly executed. This movie was a bunch of ideas that could have been good, but they were also horribly executed, and they were not very bold.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I would say. So, but yeah, so now that we kind of have that in the books, I do want to kind of just go ahead and give my own, and then as well ask you guys in a second here your thoughts on just the trilogy as a whole, because now we have the entire sequel trilogy in the books, with of course the Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker.
You think the Mandalorian, Rogue One, and Han Solo movie?
Sure. Yeah. So, like if I had to summarize this trilogy in one word, to me, it would just be
A
disappointment.
very loud fart.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, I guess that's not a bad analogy. But there you go. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
so here's and okay, so and I have to bring this up because this is a really and I hadn't thought about this a ton
I
until
think it would be this. It would be a very loud fart followed by a very long whimpering fart. That's what it would be. It would be like followed by.
yeah, yeah, that's pretty fair. So the one thing I have to talk about for a second here is, um, the one thing that I am because I think we could all kind of talk about things that we are disappointed in, speaking that word disappointment, that did not happen in this trilogy that should have happened in this trilogy, because this was a hotly anticipated thing,
Oh
especially
yeah.
after Star Wars had been away for so long and we had the prequel trilogy which wasn't that good, and then people were just clamoring for good Star Wars again, and they figured that picking up where they left off after Return of the Jedi we could get some good Star Wars out of it, and so on. The one thing that we didn't get out of this sequel trilogy, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and every time I think about it, it bothers me more and more and more. We never got an on-screen reunion of Luke, Han, and Leia, the original trio from
Or
the
a
original
good lightsaber battle.
movies. In Yeah, that too, but but this is even worse for me in my opinion, because that was, I think this was the number one thing that every fan of Star Wars wanted to see, because you hadn't seen these characters
Yeah, we want to
together.
see Luke. We want to see Luke and Leia make out again.
Oh my god. No, but yeah, that's what I really wanted, is I wanted that reunion. And to me, this actually makes me think less of The Force Awakens, because if there was any movie to have done that reunion in, it would have been The Force Awakens, because they
In
knew
the
that in
episode.
this trilogy we were going to be losing all three of those characters, one in each movie, and they
I
knew
don't
that.
think they had it planned out that well, to be honest.
Well, that's what they say. So they say that the kind of the goal was that it was going to be a sort of passing of the torch, changing of the guard, and that Luke, Han, and Leia, one each, were going to die off in this trilogy of movies. So if that was the case, which I'm fine with on the surface, I'm fine with that notion. The reunion 100% should have happened in The Force Awakens, and the fact that we never got that reunion of Luke, Han, and Leia on this big screen, and we never will again, really burns me, because it was supposed to be a given. It should have 100% happened. There's no
And hell, throw in Lando too for the fucking hell of it.
Oh, yeah, there's no reason that it shouldn't have happened. There's
This
literally
is
like that should
exactly
have
how it
been.
would. This is exactly how it would have happened. Luke Skywalker comes in with his lightsaber and he thinks that he's going into like a big fight, but it's Han Solo's guy's blaster. He's like, "Hey kid, what the hell are you doing?" And then Lando's like, "Ha ha, you old pirate!" And then Leia comes in
Yeah,
and she's
yeah,
like,
there you go.
"Woo!"
I
There
would
you
have
go.
enjoyed watching that more than just about anything I enjoyed out of the last two movies combined. So,
Yeah.
I like that should have been mission statement number one for this trilogy, was to do a feel good reunion of some sort with these characters, and it never happened, and it
Also, I
never
feel like
will.
they should have totally made like Princess Leia or General Leia like a surly old woman, like Carrie Fisher kind of was, because that would have been fucking awesome.
Yeah, not
Instead of
not like
like,
all
I like
nice and stuff.
I like how they got the timing of the Kessel Run done wrong, like in the movie.
God damn it.
Yeah, we're not talking about Solo, but
No, but I'm just saying, like when they got the ship, it's this is a Falcon. This is a ship that did the Kessel Run, and then like gets it wrong and has to get corrected.
oh, that was just a joke in the yeah, that was in the Force Awakens, the only one of these movies that was actually any good, where Grey's like, oh, it's the ship that made the Kessel Run
No,
at
that was
14
even in the
parsecs.
last one.
No,
But she got it wrong again in the last one.
did she? Oh, I don't even remember that.
Yeah, I was like, okay.
Well, don't remember.
This sounds like a bad writing plot of what they would do.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so another thing I think, so that's the big one for me, is we never got that feel good reunion on screen, and that one really stings. Um, Another big one, and I know, Johnny, this was a big one for you, and I think for all of us, I think we can say, is we all wanted to see Luke Skywalker kicks some ass, and
Oh God, fuck yes. Okay, so this is probably the biggest one for
is it
me. Like
time? Is it
seriously, I'm
time
glad
for
you
Johnny to
mentioned this
rant?
because
I think it is. Go for it.
I, like I really could have thought. Sure, let's go. I really like fuck. I was at all right. Last Jedi at the end of the movie when I saw Luke Skywalker standing there out in the field with all the AT-ATs or whatever, the big versions of them pointed at him, and Kylo Ren, and then they all shoot at him, and he just like brushes off his shoulders. I was like, the rest of this terrible movie, it was all worth it just for this moment right now. Luke is fucking back. He's gonna kick ass. He taps back into the Force, and you know what happened? Fucking nothing. He just dies for no reason, and he just like fizzles out like a fucking pansy that doesn't matter. He's like, I'm actually not even really here. Like, what the fuck? Like you do not even realize when I was in the theater, I almost fucking cried.
It was like the Avenger moment where like Spider-Man was like, yeah, if you cared enough, you'd actually be here, and like Tony comes out of the suit, but instead it was like, if you cared enough, you'd actually be here, and like Luke's like, oh, he's like, I really don't care that much.
Yes, it's even worse though because it's like I thought it was like he was going to be a badass, and I wanted to see Luke like do something like fight. Even if Kylo Ren would have killed him, because it would have set up Kylo Ren as such a badass that he killed Luke Skywalker. It's just this entire trilogy was just so much wasted potential. Like Luke could have been a badass. Luke could have got killed by Kylo Ren for emotional impact. Rey could have fucked up and done something wrong at some point, but instead she didn't. Like there was so many things that could have happened that would have had some kind of impact, but instead the movie's just a fucking wet fart. The entire trilogy is just a fucking wet fart. Like it's so frustrating as someone who like wanted to see good movies out of this trilogy, and instead we just got like I actually heard this really interesting theory that was like the Empire Strikes Back was like the outlier. It was like the one, it's like the linchpin that's holding this house of cards together. Like Star Wars is actually terrible, and the only thing that worked was Empire Strikes Back, and everything else was like the Ewoks and the freaking Jar Jar Binks, and George Lucas is insane, and like Kathleen Kennedy's a moron, and everything having to do with Star Wars is terrible except for the Empire Strikes Back. And I'm actually starting to kind of believe that a little bit. I think that's about over.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you just said completely. Yeah, and that was a big one for me and Mitch. I know you too. Is that because I know Mitch is like one of
Like
the
I'm
biggest
so pissed.
Luke
I can't even,
Skywalker
like
marks there
Luke
is.
Skywalker should have done something. Like he didn't do anything.
Yeah, I know. I know. And we've talked about this before. Like Luke being one of the most iconic heroes in all of cinema and one of the most beloved characters in cinema, and the fact that the Last Jedi, and I think this might have a large portion to do with our opinion of the Last Jedi being so bad, is the fact that when you boil down its essence, the Last Jedi was essentially just a complete and total character assassination of Luke Skywalker.
That
Because
was definitely part of it.
that was part of the reason why we think it's so bad, but that is what it did to the character that was Luke Skywalker. Is you take this character who you follow his journey throughout the original trilogy of becoming like a dumbass farm boy who doesn't know shit and doesn't is powerless essentially, into becoming like this badass hero who saves everything and everyone. And then
As like he has like unlimited hope, and he somehow like it's super idealistic, but somehow his moral, he's kind of like Captain America, where like his morals and his principles, like he sticks to them so hard. Like Captain America was going to stand up to Thanos, and even though he had no chance of fighting like his army of thousands of fucking aliens and spaceships, he was going to take him on with his one guy with his broken shield, right? Like Luke Skywalker would go up and go to the Death Star on his own with giving up in handcuffs, and go up against freaking Darth Vader and the Emperor in the throne room, and like still come out on top because he had such strong belief in the fact that he was doing the right thing. And then that doesn't even matter.
He was like the Batman. He was like Batman. It just didn't work out.
I don't flatter Batman.
well, I mean, but that's what I was.
But if you want to talk about throwing yourself into danger and having such a strict moral compass and being such a badass, I mean, you've pretty much defined Batman.
Sure. But
You had to get it in there somewhere.
yeah,
I did.
but so
I
that's what I
did.
was kind of leading you into, Mitch. Is like all that stuff that we kind of said is that is 100% true of Luke, and like I said, I know you being like a just a huge Luke Skywalker mark and just loving the character so much. Of just that's one of the reasons for you too, that just the Last Jedi just hurt so much, and it just
You know what's funny is I don't
If
even
they would
think
have
I was.
made if they would have made Legends like canon, and actually made movies off of like new movies and a whole new like at this point they need to reboot Star Wars. So like if they just did it off of Legends, oh, incredible. I don't know if
It
either of
is
you's
much
read
better.
it, but it's incredible.
It was much better. But I honestly like I wasn't as big of a Luke Skywalker fan like after Return of the Jedi. I was actually a bigger Luke Skywalker fan, like anticipating Force Awakens because I was like,
mhm.
something's gonna happen here, and guess
Yeah.
what? Nothing happened there.
Yep, and that's what it is, and I was the same way as you guys were. As I wanted to see that, and we should have got it, and there was no reason why we shouldn't have got it, but we didn't get it. And just like the reunion, the feel good moment, we there was no reason that we shouldn't have got it, but we didn't get it. So there you go. And
Fuck.
um, I think that and I understand, another thing, and I know we might have glossed over it before, but I do want to kind of just throw this out there as far as like, viewing the trilogy as a whole. Um, I get that they were trying to make like one movie, or at least they've come out and said this. They were trying to make one movie of the sequel trilogy each about one of those original characters each. So obviously Han's was the Force Awakens, Luke's was the Last Jedi, and Leia's was supposed to be the Rise of Skywalker. Unfortunately, with the untimely passing of Carrie Fisher, that definitely threw a monkey wrench into their plans, which I can understand as being another portion of the reason that the Rise of Skywalker ended up being such a mess. Definitely not the sole reason by any stretch of the imagination, but definitely a big contributing factor. Um, but I think that they definitely could have and should have tried to structure that a little better, because they tried to. I think, in my opinion, that the very idea of that is kind of flawed, because you're trying to separate this group of people who that's what people wanted to see. Is people didn't want to see a movie just with Han Solo, a movie just with Luke Skywalker, a movie just with Princess Leia. They wanted to see that group of characters together again. That's what fans wanted. That's what I wanted. That's what I know we all wanted. And they didn't
And we
do it.
wanted to see them do. At the end of the day, we didn't just want to see them together. We wanted to see them do something meaningful and not just like fizzle out like farts.
Yes, that is 100% accurate as well. Yes, we wanted to see them come together and do something meaningful and awesome, like we know that they've done and they did before, and that they're capable of doing again. And we didn't get it. And at the end of the day, I think I kind of sort of in a way know why, is because that's just not what the filmmakers wanted. They did not care about
So
paying
what the fuck
proper
did they want? I don't get it. What the fuck did they want? Like it's like they
they
wanted to
see
not
here's
make
here
money.
I have
They
a I
wanted
have
each subsequent movie to make less than the
They
previous.
wanted to
Like
kill
they
Star
wanted
Wars.
they wanted to piss off a bunch of fans. Yeah, they wanted to like lose money on their investment. Like what the fuck did they want?
so I mean that ended up being the end result 100%. But what I think personally what these filmmakers wanted is they wanted to promote the new generation, the new guard of Star Wars, and they didn't care about the old guard. And it is so obvious in everything that they did in these movies. And I think the closest they actually came to doing it right was again in The Force Awakens, which is again the only movie in this trilogy that's any good in my opinion. um, is that the way that they did Han Solo in that movie was actually good in my opinion. They did him justice. They that's kind of like the way you'd want to see like a character like that go out, is he did Han Solo got to kick some ass in that movie. You got to see him back in action. You got to see him do things that mattered. He ended up sacrificing himself trying to save his son, which makes sense. But it's like with Luke and Leia in the subsequent movies was just not in any facet justice to those characters. And it's like I said, it's almost like the filmmakers just didn't care. Like what I was hoping for in this trilogy of movies, because I think I said this all the way back when, like even before The Force Awakens came out, I said that I thought that these movies were going to be about a changing of the guard, a passing of the torch, that it was going to be, you were going to see Luke, Han, and Leia all die in these movies in some way, shape, or form.
Which would have been awesome if they did it right.
Exactly. And that's the point I'm driving at here, is that there is a way to do a natural, sensible changing of the guard and passing of the torch. And this trilogy 100%
That he
did
could have had
not
Leia fight
do that.
Kylo.
I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
sure, that would.
even like, come on, there's so many things that could have happened, but they
Yes.
fucked up
This
all the
was, yeah,
time.
basically what this trilogy boils down to, as sad as it makes me and much as it pains me to say it, is this
Batman sucks.
trilogy.
I just want to say, Batman is a terrible hero. He does not have any superpowers.
Oh
He
my god.
pretends like he's cool, but
No.
he's not.
Oh no. I'm not
He's like
starting this
he's like the
argument.
he's the Kylo Ren of superheroes.
Oh, I'm
Done.
not starting this argument right now. I swear to God, I will
Suck
mute
a
both of you.
dick, bro.
I will mute both of you. I don't want to hear this right. I don't want to hear this Batman argument 2 hours into a Star Wars podcast. But my point is simply this. This trilogy, as much as it pains me to say it, as sad as it makes me, was basically an out with the old, in with the new scenario, but in the most unceremonious and disrespectful way possible to the old guard, to the old characters, to the old
But like, all right,
way.
listen. I would have been okay with them disrespecting and shitting on the old characters. Seriously, if they would have done something with it, something interesting or something compelling or something like fun, but it was just shit. The whole thing was just it was seriously a fucking wet fart. Like the whole thing was not. It was nothing. Like it just makes me think like, where's the Star Wars movie? When's that happening? Right?
Yep.
Like,
Yeah, I mean, and it's. I think I came to
like
this.
shit on the characters and tear them apart all you want, but give me something compelling.
Well, yeah, that's. I mean, so my thought is this. I don't want to see that happen to characters that I love, but I will agree with you in the sense that if you're going to tear characters apart that I love, you damn well better make it mean something. You damn well better do it right, and that didn't happen here. Like I said, the closest we got to that was the way that they did Han Solo in The Force Awakens, but it's like that just feels like it was so long ago, and and all the good things
It's
that Force
become
Awakens did have been
inconsequential.
subsequently rendered inconsequential thanks to the failures of the last two movies. But it's like it's a mess. It's Star Wars is a mess right now, unfortunately. That's why the three of us idiots are here bitching about this again.
To
Is
quote Bret Hart. To quote Bret Hart, 4 out of 10.
Yeah. So what can I say except for The Mandalorian's good. Go watch it if you haven't.
I
Um,
haven't seen it.
it's a good show. If they were
Well, it's
able
got to
to,
be better than these movies.
it's definitely way better than these movies. These last two movies. Solo was better too, actually, and that was just a spin-off that didn't matter. Rogue One was better, and that was also a spin-off that didn't matter. Um,
Mhm.
So, I don't know what it is where the mainline Star Wars movies can't get it together for whatever reason. Maybe it's what you were talking about, Johnny, where they're just trying to be bold, but they're in over their heads and they're out of their element and they're doing it. They're trying to
I
be
think
bold,
I
but
think
in all
they're
the
it's
wrong
like
ways. So,
they're trying to be bold, but they have no like vision or like reason for being bold. They're just trying to be bold, and they really don't know where to go with it, and they really don't know what to do, and they probably have like a bunch of ideals that are like really probably misguided and not. They don't like really specifically care about the Star Wars characters or care about the fans or care about the this and that.
well, that's
They care about
blatantly obvious through the last two
yeah.
movies. That's
They only
blatantly obvious. Is the filmmakers do not give a rat's ass about the fans,
I feel like
about the
the one thing
characters, about
they're
any of
trying to
that.
do they probably thought that they were trying to push the envelope as far as they could, but they didn't realize that like again there has to be like a substance or like a compelling reason or like an overarching plot or like just give me something to sink my teeth into other than like this god awful nonsense.
Yep, that about sums it up. I think. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add on any of that note, Mitch, as far as any of that goes. But I think that pretty well covers our.
Batman sucks.
God, not again.
I definitely agree.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that what else can we say? I mean, I don't know what the
Agree that
future
Batman sucks.
holds. Well, oh, stop. I don't know what the future. Oh, actually, I do have one more thing I want to say. What kind of a world do we live in, okay, where DC is turning out better movies than Star Wars now? Like, what the fuck is happening? Like, we had the
Well,
Joker.
actually, there was one period of time. I think it was actually like 2005, like before Revenge of the Sith came out, but after Attack of the Clones came out, but also after Batman Begins came out. That was the only other time.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know what's going on, but like, and I don't know what the future holds for Star Wars, but I mean, I know they're going to do more because they're still making money despite themselves. Although there was definitely a drop off in this movie, um, they still made their billion. Unfortunately, despite not having my $10 in their pocket, they still made it. But they
But they
or I
got
should
it
say,
because
not my $10 as fast as it would have been because I still saw it in theaters. Um, but
so Rise
yeah,
of
I mean,
Skywalker. Uh,
it at the end of the day, I mean, who
if you
knows
were
what the future holds for Star Wars? I mean, we can only hope that. I guess there's nowhere to go but up from here, right? We would like to think that, right?
well, Rise of Skywalker so far is at a
What's that? I
one
think you cut
year.
out there. Okay. Um. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, but
Wait,
I.
He's talking very low. I think
Yeah.
he's having
oh sorry.
technical difficulties.
Yeah. We've
Fuck.
definitely had our fair share of those today, as you can probably
Well,
tell. Listening, the fans can probably tell. But yeah, I mean, I think that's probably a pretty good place to leave it anyway. I guess we can only hope that from this point forward, Star Wars does something to clean its act up, turn itself around, and I think they're planning more like TV shows on Disney Plus. So maybe those will be good. Like I mentioned, I recently watched The Mandalorian, the first ever live action Star Wars series on Disney Plus. That was very good. I do recommend it.
What about the Ewok movie?
No, I don't recommend the Ewok movies.
So just for a quick summary, Force Awakens had $2.068 billion at the box office. Last Jedi had 1.33 billion at the box office. So far, Rise of Skywalker has had 1.03 billion, which likely will not surpass uh, Last Jedi. It might get close, but it's probably
Right. So yeah, that's what I was trying to say. Is they still, at the end of the day, Star Wars is going to be a brand that's going to make money despite itself, despite the fact that they're coming out with some god awful, product as of late. Um, it is what it's a brand that everybody knows, and some people still like it. Unfortunately, um, the the base is split. It has been since the Last Jedi, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. But I guess only time will tell whether or not Star Wars can kind of get it back together. I hope. I'm not going to hold my breath at this point. But I would hope that they can turn it around and do something positive and maybe learn from the mistakes that these last two movies have made that kind of tanked this trilogy and kind of just put everything into a state of shit, for lack of a better word. But I mean, who knows? Who knows? But I guess that's a good place to leave it. So, thanks for watching again, everybody. Hope you all enjoyed. Please hit that like button, leave a comment, and/or subscribe if you did enjoy, and stay tuned for more new videos in the future, more episodes of the Captain's Table to come. I want to thank the not so expert panel of movie critics for joining me once again, Jonny Reps and Mitchelonius. So if you guys would like
Thank you
to,
for having me.
of course, no problem. If you guys want to sign off, that would be the time.
All right, well, take care, everybody.
Yes, that is Mitch, and I don't know if Johnny's still there, but
yeah. I'm still here. Batman sucks. Sign.
oh my god. All right, we're not going there. So, all right.
Hey, suck a dick. Signing off.
Alrighty.
big of a dick as Batman.
Oh my god. All right, that's it, and we'll see you next time.
And John sucks. Have